Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 10 of season 1, Inclusion Starts Now podcast, where I am going to talk about presuming competence. Um, so, this has been something that I think a lot of people don't even really think about. Um, because it is a pretty common belief to assume that someone who can't communicate or who has like behaviors or might be stimming or not giving you eye focus, that they're not paying attention to what you're saying. And I think it is very clear to say, very easy to say, uh, very right, true to say, uh, that you don't need to be giving someone eye contact to hear them. You don't need to be, trying to give your undivided attention to understand everything that's going on. Um, I can say personally for me, when I am in like lecture courses or trainings or anything, I eventually get to a point where I just like have to doodle. And it could just be doodling the notes. Like I will be making words, whatever. And that also kind of helps me study the material because then I'm focusing on the certain words that I'm trying to learn or memorize. And I remember teachers telling me to stop doodling. And to me, I was like, and don't get me wrong, sometimes I was a distraction, but sometimes I was like, I don't know, I'm so bored. This is the only way to keep me thinking about the topic at hand. Uh, so, not, assuming that people can understand you, even if their behavior is kind of saying otherwise. And you know what? I'm actually going to give some other tips about like with reading and stuff. I read this thing once about how when you're reading to like really small children, and I think it said under 5, but I would say like you can do this with almost anyone. Is like if you're reading a story and they like get up and kind of start doing something else, just to keep reading the story because they could still be listening. They're just like also exploring while they're listening to the story. Like they don't have to sit there to watch you read to understand what's going on. So I thought that was a really interesting study that was done. And people have even said that they will like be reading to their child and then they'll stop because the child's off playing. And then the child all of a sudden will be like, hey, where'd the story go? So it's like they're hearing the story, but just not listening in the way that you are assuming that they should be listening. So I think presuming competence is also uh, understanding, accepting that there are different ways to receive information, to communicate, to like learn information. And we don't know how much someone is learning from, how we're teaching, especially for someone with a disability who might not have a way to communicate right now. And so, I mean, it really just like goes to show that you should be talking to every person like the age that they are. Um, so, yeah, if you're talking to a baby with a disability, talk to them like a baby. If you're working with kids in elementary school with disabilities, talk to them like you would to any elementary school student. And don't tell me that if an assessment they have is showing that they're cognitively at a 3-year-old level and they're 12, I don't care. You should always talk to them like a valuable human being. And you should always be talking to them, I mean, just respectfully and as the age that they are. And I think part of that is like really being able to show someone that you are respecting them. Because I can say, as somebody who has worked in the disabled field for over 10 years, you can tell when a child with a disability doesn't like someone. And the people that they usually don't like are the ones who are sitting there babying them just like over the top. So I was just thinking a lot about this whole pursuing competence because I am in this book club. And this is actually a great way to sneak in inclusion talk, disability awareness, to any of your groups of I've done this with multiple book clubs where I recommend a book that has either disability representation or is educational, like about the disability community, the disabled community. And so I'm just going to tell you about all three books that I've done. So first, I did Disability Visibility, and it's a bunch of short stories by disabled authors, edited by Alice Wong, and it's a great book. And she's coming out with a second book, and I think it's about like passion or sex with, I don't know if it's sex. I think it's more like passion. It's all about like that disabled people are sexual beings as well. And again, I mean, this definitely falls into the category of like presuming competence, of like, just because they have a disability doesn't mean they don't have like basic human needs. So, uh, I already pre-ordered her book, and I think it comes out at the end of this month, and I'm really excited about it. So that book. And then I did The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. Again, I absolutely love that book. It's not really about disabilities. It is about inclusion, and I do think it's a really good book to like talk about behaviors and how that shouldn't be excluding you from your community. So, phenomenal book, and everyone loves that book. Disability Visibility did give us some really good talking points with the group of people that I was with at that time. And we did talk a lot. I mean, at that point, I had one person in that book club say that she was like, I don't understand like why I felt like I was getting yelled at while reading this book. It's not me who's being mean towards you. And she is a white woman. And I just remember thinking like, well, this is, they're mad. They're not, these authors are not being treated equally. They're not being treated with fairness. They're not being treated as competent adults. And they are mad. And yeah, they might not be mad at you specifically, but we're part of the community. And you being upset because you're getting yelled at just goes to show that we have a lot more learning to do. The House in the Cerulean Sea, everyone loved it. I do feel like there was really good questions that I Googled like book club questions for that book. Um, and I felt like we had a good conversation. And then the third book, which is something that so all of these books, this has been years in the making. But this last book was Happiness Falls. And this is with a group of women that are religious. So, which I'm, again, not against any religion. Well, I mean, I'm against people not feeling comfortable. As long as you feel comfortable and happy and loved, that's what's important. But it is a different kind of book club, as I am like the one of two women who do not identify as religious. And you can go listen back to episode 8 or 9 or whatever one I did about that. But we were talking about the book Happiness Falls, and it's a book about this dad. The dad goes missing, and their autistic son is the last person to have seen him. So they don't know, and he does not have a way to communicate. He does not have. Oh, and he also has Angelman syndrome. So it looks like, so he smiles a lot. So even if he's not happy, he's smiling. And so that is just like a really interesting part of the whole story. The whole story takes place during COVID, as this author just happened to write it during COVID. And then they actually had COVID kind of play a toll in, like when the autistic son had a mask over his smile. Oh my gosh, I have food in my teeth. You're only going to know if you saw the video. That the mask hides a smile, and so then once you only saw his eyes, his family said it was easier to know what he was feeling because that big beautiful smile was hidden. And then having it be COVID also like changed some of the things that would have happened, but because COVID was happening, like I don't really want to give it away, so you gotta read it. So the whole story is told through the sister's perspective, and she has like some fun personality traits to follow throughout the whole thing. And what kind of starts happening is that the family starts finding out that the dad was taking the son to a speech therapist who was teaching him how to communicate with either pictures or buttons. I kind of read that. I read this a few months ago, but was teaching him a way to communicate. And he was getting good at it. And it seemed like the dad was about, to tell them. And so then the whole story kind of becomes this like, this awakening moment for all the family that they're like, oh, how much does he know? Like, how much has he understood from us talking? Like, we've like talked bad about him in front of him, and just assuming that he's not knowing what we're saying. And that is what is so dangerous when people don't presume competence, because a lot of people will start, they'll like talk bad about a student because they don't know how much they're understanding, or they're talking down to the student, which is also just like, I don't know, who wants to be talked down to? um, And then it's, you're not having high expectations for the student. You're, having them count to five for the 1000th time. And you're wondering why they're having like a huge behavior because like they're bored. You're not teaching them anything new. So I feel like it's so important to presume competence. And this book, Happiness Falls, and in this book club, it gave all of these other people who were reading it with me, they said that they left it, even though some of them didn't even like the book, they said it made them reflect on themselves, on how they communicate to the people they know in their life that have a disability. One of them works in the special ed field as a para. One of them has a child with complex medical needs. Another one had a brother who is autistic. Uh, and then the other two, the other one also has a child with a disability. And then the other one works a lot with, I think, veterans. So people with disabilities, but to her, she didn't even see it as she was just like, oh, well, I work with people like that, but I don't consider those as disabilities. And at one point of book club, I did say like, and this is like I knew that we were all moms, in this book club. Um, and I reminded them that, being pregnant is considered a disability. Like, you need accommodations to do something. Disability doesn't mean that like you're not capable of doing something. It just means that you probably have an accommodation that's going to help you do it, which is fine because everyone has accommodations to successfully do something. So, great conversation. And I just highly recommend, if you're in any sort of a group where you need to like pick a new hobby or pick up new book to read or a new podcast to listen to or a new show to watch, like we are on the rise. We are increasing our disability representation in books and in movies and in TV shows. I said hobbies, and I'm not quite sure why I said hobbies, but I don't know. Why not? Why not pick up a new hobby? Today, I just finished my last pottery class for my hobby of the month, which was of April. And I just realized that I am like far behind. I was, because I do this for my virtual courses that I do throughout the year. And I was just thinking like, oh my gosh, I finished pottery, but now my next course is in like 3 weeks. And I need to like start doing pickleball tomorrow because that's my new hobby. Anyways, that I went off topic there. So presuming competence. So what else like that needs to look like for in the classroom? Um, it is to like continue. So okay, it's to continue to educate them, but you also really need to find a way to have any sort of communication. I'm kind of shocked when communication isn't like a main goal. And even if it's like for you to understand how they're communicating, behaviors is a way of communicating, facial expressions, gestures. Um, if you're working one on one with a student and they get up and just walk out and they like, or leave the classroom. I don't think I've talked about this yet on this podcast. I do not like the word elopers. Um, a student can elope. I don't even usually say that, but I would much rather hear someone say, like, yeah, this student has the tendency to elope sometimes. So, you need to make sure you're watching them because they'll just sneak right out the door. Um, Instead of being like, oh, yep, I got a classroom with three elopers. Um, I just feel like the language there is like a very negative language towards a student. And it's kind of like, okay, I know I'm really just gonna like walk this out and I'm not even quite sure if this really makes sense. But like when people get told it's like, oh, you're so dramatic or something. And then I feel like eventually someone's like, oh, well, I guess I'm just so dramatic. I'm just gonna be like this. Like if you keep getting told you are something, you're probably going to believe it and then you're probably going to act on it. And I have no data to back that up. That's just totally me observing this conversation while I'm talking to you. Um, so yeah, so back to presuming competence. So it really finding a way to successfully communicate instead of thinking that like behaviors or a student just getting up and walking away is like a slap in your face, or even a literal slap to the face. Like, what does that behavior mean? And like, what are they trying to communicate? Like, don't assume that these behaviors are just because they don't like you. I mean, don't get me wrong, maybe that is what they're communicating. But if you're sitting there talking to them like a baby, asking them to count to five, and it's like the end of the school year and you're still doing it because they're not doing it the way that you want them to do it. It's like, okay, well then how else can you test that they know that knowledge? So you're not sitting there like trying to get them say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Actually, I have a great example for this. I had a student, his parents really wanted him to learn to write. And he could write his name. It was not very clean. And this was a goal he had year after year after year. And he was a third grader with me. And his writing goal was to write his name like in a 1 inch box. Like it was just, they were trying so hard to get his writing nice and neat. And I eventually said, like, he understands words and letters. Like he knows his words and letters. Um, but he doesn't like articulate or enunciate well. And and his writing is really big. Like, he's in third grade. We're like, well, it's not like we're gonna stop working on writing, but I think he's also getting really bored. And like, I don't know, is writing really that big of a deal anymore? Like, what if we really focus on like a reading comprehension at third grade level, at the level the grade level he is in? Let's read a third grade book, read to him aloud, maybe the question, and then put out answers and have him choose. Or maybe let him look at the sentence and see if he knows the question. Like, we have no idea how much he's reading. Just because he can't verbally say how much he's reading or understanding doesn't mean he's not reading and understanding everything that's happening. So that was, and that it's, this is like a very interesting, all of these conversations. I guess this is a good way to end season 1 of this like pilot podcast episode of just how different inclusion looks on everybody and how different every day is going to look, and that you as someone who's learning how to be inclusive, you shouldn't be focused on like that everyone's going to have these same results or that like every day is going to look like you're improving. Like it really has to be like this mindset that you are also working on, that kind of, and it's always growing. Like you're always trying to figure out where is the student at, what's next, How can I keep fading myself out? Like, there are a lot of balancing pillars when working with a student. And trying to find the best way to support them to get more and more independent is, it takes work and it takes a lot of practice. I was just in an IEP where I was asking about how much the child was being included as he used to be in a totally inclusive setting. And then they kind of pulled him out into a special day class. And I asked what, how they were helping him with his work and everything. And one of the service providers was like, well, it takes a lot of time to get the work before, make all the accommodations, have it ready for the day. Like, and we just don't have the time to do that for all of his work all day. And I was like, you don't have to. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, you know the goals, you get the work, find that common ground, and then like there are so many ways you can accommodate on the spot that even if it's just like giving them two options, and it could be eye gaze or pointing or verbally saying what they had, what like the answer. Um, maybe they're tracing the letter with their finger, maybe a pen, maybe they're writing. Like there there is so many different ways, and each child is going to look so different. So it's like, how do we train people in education on how to like effortlessly accommodate to everyone on the spot with basic equipment that's already in the classroom? Um, and don't get me wrong, sometimes there are going to be like special projects of like, okay, we're all going to be doing some clay thing, but this kid doesn't like touching clay, or yeah, I don't know, whatever. Um, so there's so much I want to say. So hopefully we'll have a season two coming up. Um, I'm thinking of trying to do some guests. So if anybody who has been listening to this at all wants to talk about a subject that they feel passionate about in inclusion, I would love to have you here. Um, and that is that. So I hope you have learned something great about pursuing competence. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can follow me on Inclusion Starts Now and everything. And I hope you have a beautiful day. That is a wrap for season 1, episode 10. Um, Inclusion starts with you, and I just want to help. Thank you. Bye. End session.